Hello Intuitors, it's Aria here and I'm finally back. I'm so sorry I was gone for so long. When that whole project began, it wasn't my intention to disappear from doing videos for so long. I hadn't really thought that through at all. But once I got going into it, there's no stopping me, especially when I realized I was taking on such a big project and I've got that focus and I just needed to stay on it. And of course, I also thought along the way, oh, it'll only be another week and then I'll be done and then I'll, get videos out. And then I was thinking, well, I'll stop and do some videos, but I just couldn't find it within me to do that, especially because once I really got into creating these cards, all I wanted to do was use these cards and use them for you guys in these readings. So actually, at this very moment, I am sitting here waiting for FedEx to show up. They should be here any minute. And they are going to be delivering me my single test deck that I got printed. It was $85 to print one deck of cards with shipping, and so kind of an expensive deck, but it'll be worth it because at least I'll probably do another round of another test deck within the next couple of weeks with any kind of changes I feel I need to make, and that'll be part of the process of preparing to get this whole deck of cards printed. So in case you didn't know, if you're new to the channel or if you hadn't seen it so far, the big project that I have going on that I just completed, or pretty much completed, but there's still lots of things to do about it, is I created my own deck of cards. And really the inspiration behind it struck me quite suddenly in the fact of just doing it. Up until then I had been considering it and thinking, yeah, I think I'll do that. And then all of a sudden it was just like, I'm gonna just jump in. And my goal with it is, for one thing, I've developed the skills of being using Photoshop, and I'm actually quite good at it. I'm not a professional level, but I do quite well with it, and I enjoy it. I'm really a creator and a designer by heart. Everything I do, I design clothing and sew clothing. I've done that since I was really little, and I designed this whole house that I live in. My dad and I built it, and so I love to design and create. And so when I get the idea for a project, it's really ultimately fulfilling a passion that I have, which is just to make things. And so that really fit right into why I could get into such a zone with it. And when I really decided to get going on it, it made a lot of sense for several reasons. Ultimately, the primary reason I began this channel is that I have developed an app that I initially developed it based on tarot, but the same concept for my app actually works amazingly, just perfectly for Lenormand, and in fact it is actually more the style of Lenormand reading. Even that style works for Lenormand even more than tarot. I love both modalities as an intuitive tool. Don't get me wrong, I'm just kind of more into Lenormand right now because I did tarot for so long. I just am enjoying the difference. But they're both great tools. I'm also very interested in exploring other types of divination tools because I think that every tool kind of has its own voice. And when you're just kind of wanting to hear a different type of message or ask different kinds of questions, sometimes you get a different look or different clarity through that tool, because those tools are still limited tools in accessing this vast amount of information that's there for us to tap into. So I had developed this app and gotten through the whole entire process with a team of developers in India who do the programming and everything, but I created the entire concept and generated every image for every single, what they call wireframes, and throughout the whole process. And it's really a unique app. There's truly no other app like it on the market. And I really thought that I was going to be able to, get from that alpha version, which I did complete an alpha version, to a beta, and then go from the beta to the actual, general launch. But it turned out that I just couldn't make that happen with that particular team in India. And, they did a really good job with what they did to a certain point. But then to polish it up, and it started taking the time frame they were supposed to complete the app was 3 months or 4 months, and then it took 12 months or 13 months. And those last 6 months of that time was literally going back and forth over nothing. It was so frustrating. And when I say nothing, what I needed them to change was so simple and so basic, and no matter what I would do to try to communicate it, it wasn't happening, and then they changed my project manager changed, and then I didn't hear back from anybody for a month, and just is crazy stuff like that. So I finally realized I cannot work with this team any further, and realized that what I had created to that point was kind of like just, like I did it. I proved that this concept works, and it's a really good concept. But in order to develop a version that could be tested and then finally released, I would need to probably start all over again, and certainly with a different team of people. So that was last summer, toward the end of the summer, early fall, that I came to that conclusion. And about a month later, I randomly ran into somebody I started following on Twitter who's an amazing author, and I just started following him because I like his writing. And I read all the articles on his website, and then I read one of them somewhere in there where he mentioned that his real job was IT. And of course, IT could be anything. There's such a vast panoply of the kinds of things IT that title can cover. So I had no idea that he was an app developer, or if he was, what kind of apps he did. And so we had interacted a number of times on his tweets, so he knew who I was. And so I reached out to him and just told him briefly what I'm doing. And I said, this is kind of a shot in the dark, but is there any chance you'd be interested in, working on this with me if this is something you do? And he replied that thanks for thinking of him. That's exactly what he does. And his line of work, it really is so perfectly suited to it. He's a very talented designer, not just an average, there's a lot of people out there who could develop an app, but he's at that top-notch, higher level of what I would be looking for to create this app. And so just to make a long story short, when I messaged him, I had already booked a trip just to go see the fall colors. It was just going to be a trip for me, by myself. And I was going to either go to New England, Colorado, or the Smoky Mountains. And I finally decided Smoky Mountains. And it turns out that that's where he lives. And so I was about 2 weeks before I contacted him, it was when I was going to go. So we arranged for, to be able to meet in person, which was great to be able to do that. And in the long run, he has agreed to be the app developer for the Intuit app, and is really excited about it because it also fits in within his overarching goal as a writer, as an author, and just as a human being is very similar to mine, which is I really firmly believe that we're entering an era of massive change on a worldwide scale. And people are just beginning to wake up to the fact that there's so much more than what we've always been told. And we're really headed to what I would call a higher dimension. There's going to be a major shift. I think that shift will take place over time. Some people think it will happen instantly. I had thought that for a while and hoped that. But I think it's more just, we see this evolution, but when you look at kind of a before and an after, there is a really big, I believe there will be a huge jump in a fairly short amount of time. It might take a few generations or something for that to accomplish, but we're headed there. And part of that process is for us to learn to tap into our higher knowing and bringing that down into this frequency that we're currently at. And right now we need tools to do that. I needed the tools. I'm not a natural born. There are people who are born with the veil for them is very thin. And so they see spirits, they see, ghosts, they hear things more clearly. I know that I have very strong intuitive skills and gifts because I've developed them, but it took more work and learning to tune in because I'm not that person that just hears tons of things. And, sometimes I'm just getting a feeling or something, but that's been something that's developed. I've learned to tune into that, and using the tarot was my entry point into that. So my goal with the app is that eventually, that it really gives people a tool to use on a very regular, common, easy daily basis, and then also becomes a tracking tool to see, first of all, do a intuitive divination, use one of those tools to intuitively divine, more information than what meets the eye. And then they can also go back and check and see, how accurate were they, and they can kind of track their progress to see, if they're, being able to tune better into those higher frequencies of knowledge. And the tool is also just tons of fun. It's almost like a game. It's so much fun to do. So that's my ultimate goal. And it was actually James's suggestion that he said, Aria, you're a little ways off from being able to move into developing, because I needed money was the main thing, is I needed money to pay him, and then we also will have to subcontract some of the work. And so he said, why don't you start a channel, a YouTube channel with your readings? Well, I have started a YouTube channel in the past where I mostly just talk about my spiritual journey. And so I was like, yeah, I could start doing readings again on my channel. And I decided to just start a new channel because I felt like the direction I was wanting to head was quite different than what I did before. So that's why I launched this channel back in December. And the ultimate goal of the channel is really kind of in line with the app, where I'm really wanting to just bring to people tools that you can use. You are your own intuitor. So even when you're watching a reading that I create, you're going to be tapping into your intuition to kind of get a yes or a no about whether this is something that's in line with your frequency and your vibration, whether this is going to be something that's you'll see manifest into your life or not. And so starting the channel was part of that process. So when I came to the point of developing these cards, I was just like, I just want some better cards for what I do on my channel. And I wasn't even thinking immediately how, oh, these will be good for my app. And so as I got into it, I was like, yeah, that makes total sense, because I'm going to need images for my app anyway. And I hadn't also really thought through the fact that these cards could potentially do quite well selling, in sales, and that they themselves could be the tool, the stepping stone toward raising money to develop my app. And it was also very interesting was because tapping into my own higher knowing through card spreads, and also through, I do channeling. I channel and write. Sometimes when I'm on the mountain, I'll just talk into my phone as a recording and just saying what comes to my mind and my thoughts. And then I also have an intuitive channel that I speak with sometimes, and the message was always clear. That the money would come in, and it would really come in by kind of like a crowdfunding type of thing. And then I was saying, well, how? What should I do to make that happen? And they wouldn't say this. What was told, which is my higher self speaking. She said, and by the way, my higher self's name is Aria. That's why I go by the name of Aria when I'm on the channel here channeling. So Aria says, don't go looking for it. You don't need to try to figure it out. In fact, if you go into your planetary mind and you try to figure it out, what it is you're going to do, you won't. It's not going to come to you that way, but it will come to you, and it's in just part of a creative process that you will do. And I've come in my journey to a point of trusting and surrendering. And I'm a type A personality, so that doesn't come normally and naturally to me. But that's what I did. I just surrendered it. I actually filed that bit of information so far back in my mind that I didn't even remember it. So it wasn't until actually, I think, a couple days ago that I remembered. And I was like, oh my gosh, so here I am. I have created these cards. I believe these cards are going to do very well in sales, and the profits of the sales of these cards will help me develop my app. And that's exactly what I was told would happen. So one more thing I want to say about all of this, and I'm sharing this story because I believe that there's many people out there. I know a lot of people who follow my channel already and who've followed my other channel in the past. We identify as starseeds, light workers. We know we're here for a higher purpose, and part of this catalytic heart awakening experience as far as divine love partnership was part of that whole process of awakening for us. And we realized that we're here to kind of change, well, not kind of, we realize we're here to change the world. But the way we change the world isn't like going out and evangelizing. It's just changing our lives and living our lives in a different way. I quit my job as a director, as a clinic director. I had opened a clinic here in the town that I live, and then I was transferred to Anchorage, Alaska to open up another clinic there, and then I was transferred to Seattle. But it was when I was in Anchorage that my experience began in 2014, and I was just searching for answers and to what I was experiencing, because it was so crazy. And that's when I got my tarot cards and I started learning tarot. And this whole journey ended up, within a very short time, culminating in me quitting my job. And then I moved back home, have kids here. And so the kids had been kind of back and forth between me and my ex-husband. And I was only gone for about a year when I came back. And I at that time, I didn't have a job. And I began right away, actually, I got a very clear message that would just hit me like a ton of bricks when I was like turning to search. Had been applying and applying and applying for jobs, and I turned to search again, and I got this really strong feeling like it was grabbing my arms, and it said, "Don't look." And I was like, "Don't look? Well, how will I find a job and support myself if I don't look?" And then I got a very clear thought through my head that said, "It will come to you." And so it was really from that point on that I began the process of surrendering to the journey of allowing things to manifest into my life. But it didn't come quickly. Over the next, especially the first 2 years after that point, I was totally broke. I had no money. We were in the middle of building this house, my dad and I. I ended up just having to sign it over to him. He actually owns it because I couldn't even refinance it after it was completed. And so it was really hard going. I had many months and month after month where somehow or other I barely made it through, paying the most, minimum that I absolutely had to on bills. And then I had a few surges of different things that came in. I kept looking for work. Work would never, like a job kind of work, would never pan out. And in the same time, I also knew I was meant to create something more. And so I had a process there of ideas, like a sequence of a couple of different ideas that kind of built on each other that led me in a direction of planning on and trying to and going through the process of developing an app that was based on school and nonprofit fundraising. And it was a brilliant idea, but it was really too big. It ended up, failing in a sense. I never got it off the ground. And so after almost 3 years of just, focus on that and belief that it would happen, I just surrendered it and set it aside. And I came to a point in that where it would have been very difficult for a lot of people to set it aside because you've worked so hard at it. I had learned to trust and to surrender and to just let it go and believe that everything would work out in the end. But it wasn't easy. There were some times there where I was just like, if I'm supposed to do this, why is it so hard? But in the process of that, I learned app development. I learned Photoshop. I learned, so many things and tools. And then, of course, just that personal spiritual growth that was happening to me on a deeper level that, I could always see someday, somehow, some way, all of this will end up culminating and coming together into something to something else will be useful. And I will also have to say that every step along the way, I was never working hard to try to come up with an idea. And even though some of those ideas that I had ended up just, percolating in my mind, and I kept on working on it and moving forward as I could, I never pushed farther than where things really seemed to be opening. I think a few times I did, but then I would pull back, realizing that was backfiring, right? And, allowing myself to just be on this path and to manifest along the way the different things. And then also realizing that when a certain thing came to an end, that there would be a bigger reason for it that I didn't completely understand. And that someday that would reveal itself to me. Or even if it didn't, that would be okay. That's the point of surrender. And so it was about 1.5 years ago that I had set the app aside, completely thinking I'll probably never go that direction again with it. And I still don't know that I will. It probably won't be something I resurrect that I know of, who knows. But in any case, I set it aside, and then I had about 3 months of just, I don't know what I'm doing other than continuing to build up my little side business here that's bringing, actually not my side business, it is my only source of income. It's very basic and doesn't, really, not very demanding of my time. So anywhere from an hour to 3 hours a day is average, and yet it makes a decent living. So I'd keep working on that and then other projects and whatnot. And then out of the blue, I got the idea for this app, for this tarot app. And I shouldn't say out of the blue, one little thing led to another. And I discovered a different way of, looking at tarot and doing tarot card readings. And then I was like, but really, this is it was actually very much like treating tarot like Lenormand, where, you really think of it in terms of the things each card can truly say in terms of words and phrases. And so I was intrigued by that. It gave me a different approach to the cards. I was getting kind of bored in how the reading sounded when I just used the tarot the way I usually did. And so I came up with this app idea and continued, and now I'm kind of looping around to where I already completed that part of the story. So the reason I'm sharing this is because I know a lot of you, I've had people already reach out to me as clients saying, I have this idea and I know it's part of my mission and I need to do it, but I don't know how. And I can't tell you the answers of, like how, and give you the pieces of, okay, this is what you should do and all of that specifically. But the general thing that I can tell you is that first of all, these things take much more time than we would like. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we ourselves are growing through this process, and growth just takes time. You don't grow and change overnight. There's a bit of a time that takes. And we're raising our vibration. We're raising the vibration of the whole earth and everything around us at the same time. And that takes time. And so there's kind of like this, here's where we are maybe, and here's where the rest of the world is, but they're coming along. And it's harder because we are ahead. We're like, we're plowing through right now. There's tons of snow where I live. And if I go out off of the road, I'm having to make tracks, and it's, up to my knees or higher in snow. And that's where we're at. We're out in front, and the going is slow, and it's hard. And so sometimes we even have ideas that are really advanced of even what the earth is ready for, and maybe the earth isn't ready for it yet, or we're not ready personally to bring it in because we have more growing to do before we can bring it in. But the beautiful thing is that Spirit brings to us experiences and opportunities along the way to grow into where we're headed through other things, like in the case of my experience, where one thing built on another. And so the best thing my best advice would be to, if you have some kind of idea and you have this inner knowing, maybe you don't even have an idea yet, but you just know I'm meant to do something else, then first of all, it will come to you. If you go and you try really, really hard to come up with it, it won't happen that way. And that's because that's the old way. That is the 3D mentality, the mind, the planetary mind of you got to work really hard and you can come up with it, which is true. There is truth to that. But those of us who are on a journey of true awakening, and we're awake to the fact that we're headed into a much higher vibration, we're starting to live with that higher vibration. That's not how things come in that way. Things come in there through an allowing and through a surrender process and being open, and then they just appear out of serendipity. Like me creating these cards 1 month ago, it took me 3 weeks to do it. It's actually been a little less than a month ago. Took me 2 weeks to create all the images, and then another wrap up week, and that whole idea came out of literally nowhere. And came through pieces. I got that one deck of cards I usually use here with the words on it that I really liked. It was the first. There's a lot of Lenormand decks out there that have keywords on them, which is great. But anyway, though it comes out of nowhere, and when if you surrender to that process, and then every step of the way, keeping your vibration high. Of course, we have our ups and downs, but being open, trusting that you're on the right path, and then the pieces will come to you, maybe one piece at a time, and maybe the pieces that come to you now actually themselves won't come to fruition, but it doesn't mean you were a failure. It just means that was something you needed to go through, to learn, and to develop some kind of skill or growth that will then prepare you for what you finally end up doing. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I just ended up creating a video much longer than I intended. I still haven't heard the FedEx guy show up yet, so I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye for right now, and then the next video I post will have my opening reveal in it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will definitely be doing a lot more videos to showcase my cards, and then really appreciate you guys sharing my channel with other people, other viewers, people and like the videos that you watch, because that helps push me up higher on the discovery list. And we'll see you around soon.